Hey vlog, it is Tuesday. Welcome back to another reading vlog. Today we are in the Warwickshire vlog. This is what we're starting. I didn't do anything yesterday because I was at Warwick Castle yesterday, so that's in the Warwick Castle vlog, and then we literally just came home and chatted with my aunt and uncle, so literally nothing to report. I did, however, start My Fair Rosaline by Natasha Solomon. I think it's Natasha Solomon. That's really bad. And I'm liking it. I'm really liking it so far. I haven't got very far in. I think I've read like a chapter that I read last night because I went to bed quite late. But it's a good book so far. I'm loving the idea of this book is that it is a take on Romeo and Juliet from the perspective of Rosaline. For those of you who haven't actually read Rosaline, have only seen the Baz Luhrmann adaptation or whatever. Rosaline was Romeo's initial love. So Romeo's in love with Rosaline, and that's why he went to the Capulet ball party. If you're talking about the Baz Luhrmann one, that's why he wanted to go see Rosaline. Now while he's at the party, he finds Juliet and falls in love with Juliet. So this story is told from the perspective of Rosaline, the person who should have been the love interest if Romeo actually had any follow through with his romantic inclinations. So I am really liking getting Rosaline's perspective, and I am excited to continue. I don't know where exactly this is going to go, but I'm hoping that I will have a good time with it nonetheless. So today's plan is we're going to go around Coventry, we're going to go to see the cathedrals, we're going to go to the Transport Museum, which is like my granddad's temple. My granddad worked in one of the Coventry factories. So for those of you who know nothing about Coventry, it was huge in especially World War II, but before that it's always been an automobile city. It was one of the dominant manufacturers of automobiles throughout the first half of the 20th century. So we're going to the Transport Museum so that I can kind of commemorate my granddad and show the kids the kind of cars that my granddad would have been making and stuff. I'm really excited. Then after that, we are going to, I think, hang out with some of my cousins. So I'm really excited to go do all of those things, and I will hopefully take you along for the ride. Hey vlog, so today is Wednesday and we're heading out today. We're going to go to Stratford. Stratford is exactly the reason why I am reading My Fair Rosaline, because Stratford upon Avon is the birthplace of Shakespeare. It is rumoured to be where he's interred. It's where his family is from, so you can go see. I'm not going to actually go into any of the houses because they're really expensive, but you can visit his father's house, his house that he had with his wife, where his children were born and where she remained for the majority of their time, because she stayed in Stratford for a decent chunk of the time when he first moved to London to be a playwright. You can see that. You can see his mother's house. You can see the Royal Shakespeare Company Theatre, which literally hosts all of the biggest stars in Shakespeare, in Shakespearean plays. Like, there's, I think David Tennant has been there. I think Judi Dench has performed there. So it's like they always have like Shakespeare centered stuff, and it's structured in the same acoustics and format as the Globe would have been. Obviously the Globe is actually in London, which we didn't get a chance to go see. And yeah, you can just see Stratford's really heavily focused on like Tudor architecture and stuff, so that it kind of has that Shakespeare vibe to it. So I'm really looking forward to going there. We get to see like canal boats and things as well, so I think that's going to be really nice. And yeah, I'm hoping to get some kind of Shakespeare memorabilia along the way, which is going to be really nice as well. So that's the plan for today. I have literally read 2 more chapters of My Fair Rosaline. I think I've read 3 chapters in total on this Wednesday, which is not great, but I'm still really enjoying it. I don't have a huge amount more to say. I'm really liking Rosaline's voice. I think that it is really bringing a new light on the story, and it's not diminishing Shakespeare's story. It's not like mocking Shakespeare, and I mean, it's possibly mocking the people who always think of Romeo and Juliet as this like pure, beautiful, amazing love story. Now, I know that they are constantly referred to as star-crossed lovers, but that the story is a tragedy. It's not a romance. The whole point is like how pointless this feud is. So for those of you who read Romeo and Juliet and like this is the most romantic thing I have ever read, then possibly it's mocking you slightly, maybe. If you are someone who just really appreciates Shakespeare's craftsmanship and the themes that he brought forward in the story, then you'll probably really like My Fair Rosaline, because I think that she is an interesting perspective to be following, more so than any of the more prominent ones like Mercutio or whatever, because she's someone who actually survived. Like, she was also a Capulet. She's Juliet's cousin. So like, while she's not Juliet and she's not the daughter of like the lead Capulet, she still was a Capulet. So there still would have been this tension between the families over this romance between Romeo and Rosaline. So it's also like how much Rosaline was spared by Romeo's disinterest as soon as he met Juliet, which is fascinating. So I'm looking forward to continuing on with this one, and I will hopefully be able to get back to you with further thoughts post Stratford. Hey vlog, I swear it looks like I'm always wearing the same things, but I'm literally always in the same pajamas when I'm in this room. I have read another 2 chapters of Fair Rosaline, so I've read chapters 3 and 4. No, 4 and 5. I'm really liking the emphasis on the Capulets. The original story focuses a lot more on the Montague side of things from the Capulets. Obviously you get like Romeo's parents and Juliet's parents, but then in the actual like younger cast, the actual like players within the story, you have more Montagues than Capulets, because you obviously have Romeo, you have his cousin Benvolio, you have his friend whose name is escaping me at the moment, and that will annoy me. And then obviously you have Mercutio, who is Romeo's best friend. Well, on the Capulet side of things, you basically have Juliet and then eventually Tybalt. Rosaline doesn't even actually have any lines in the original play. She does not come into the fray aside from Romeo bemoaning the fact that he's in love with her and he wants to go and see her at this masquerade, only for him to then go and fall in love with Juliet at this particular ball instead. Rosaline isn't even a particularly huge character. So then seeing all of the different characters that unfold within this story has been fascinating, especially Tybalt, because obviously getting Tybalt from the perspective of a Capulet is amazing. Now that we know the actual Romeo and Juliet play, now for those of you who don't know the Romeo and Juliet play, I suppose skip ahead a little bit. Big spoilers for a 300-plus-year-old play. Within the original story, of course, Tybalt does die, and where Romeo is coming into the party unannounced, where he was not invited to this party, and these families are foes. So the reason that Tybalt hates Romeo is quite apparent. Now, obviously, from the story's perspective, it's kind of pitching it as, you know, well, Romeo's in love with Juliet, so why would Tybalt be so angry? Why would he not be okay being his kinsman? Romeo's done nothing. So this adds force to that, where, of course, so in this, Rosaline is friends with Tybalt. She's incredibly close with Tybalt, and Tybalt is potentially even in love with Rosaline. So we have it where in this story, Rosaline is being seduced by Romeo, and it definitely feels more like seduction than love. Now, I don't know if we're going to have it where Romeo is actually in love with Juliet, or if he's just seducing her. Given that he's going to kill himself over her, I suspect he's going to genuinely be in love with Juliet, while Rosaline is someone he was just seducing. He is intending to marry Rosaline, at least as of this moment. I don't know if that is going to change. I don't know if he's going to meet Juliet and then fall out of love with her, or if they're going to fall out in love with each other before that. But Tybalt has proposed marriage to Rosaline so she doesn't get sent to a nunnery. The whole idea is that she's going to be sent to a convent because her mum knows what men in this era are like. She knows how brutal they can be. She knows what the cost of being a wife can be, what the cost of bearing children can be. So she, before she died, decreed that Rosaline, her favorite child, should go to a convent instead, because she deemed a convent more freedom than marriage. Rosaline does not agree and does not want to go to a convent. So having it where you have Tybalt Tybalt and Romeo are both promising to save her from this convent, and at the moment she is choosing Romeo. And the book is somewhat pitching that as the wrong choice. Like, I definitely am feeling like, nah girl, please marry Tybalt. Tybalt seems adorable. And obviously Tybalt is somewhat the villain almost in the play, like, because you're getting it mostly from Romeo and from Juliet, and Tybalt being hugely opposed to their match. Tybalt's kind of the villain of the story. So having Tybalt be the preferable option to Romeo, who you can totally tell is in Seducer 101 mode, I think is absolutely fascinating. Also, Romeo throughout the entire original play has a lot of like fanciful lines, and so does Juliet. But Romeo has a lot of fanciful lines talking about how fair she is, how, you know, he envies the moon that shines upon her and all of that shit. And what we have in here is that these are lines, these are practiced lines that Romeo is delivering as part of his seduction. And so instead of it being like he just naturally speaks in this very flowery voice and constantly has these pretty things to say, it's more that he is a practiced seducer who originally practiced these things on Rosaline before working them on Juliet. So I'm really liking getting this narrative of Romeo just being a serial seducer and almost the thrill of the chase that comes with it being Capulet women, which makes sense if you think about it, because obviously in the play he was originally in love with Rosaline and literally talking about how in love with Rosaline he is. And you have Mercutio actually calling him out on his shit. So then having him then fall in love with Juliet, it being, well, he went from absolute being in love with Rosaline to like, let's never talk about Rosaline again, I'm everything for Juliet. But also the fact that he went for cousins who were both Capulets means that then he clearly is more interested in the fact that Capulets than he lets on, which means it is kind of a thrill of the chase thing, which I really did appreciate in the story, in the way that this is being handled. So hopefully I can go sit downstairs and read a little bit more. Now I have been in bed for way too long, so I'm gonna go sit downstairs and read a bit more, and then I'll probably check back in tomorrow and hopefully have at least maybe gotten halfway. That would be quite nice, but I think that this is going to end up coming on the plane with me at this rate. Who looks as rough as nails? I do. I look rough. I feel rough. I've been up since 5 a.m. I've had about 3 hours sleep because I couldn't sleep properly last night. I'm home. You may recognize. I am home. I'm back in Spain. I did finish Fair Rosaline. I finished it a couple days ago, but it's been like a really family-centered weekend because 2 of my aunties had their birthdays this weekend while we were in the UK. So we went to go see them. So I have not updated you. I've really loved this. I've given this 5 stars. The angle of getting it through Rosaline's perspective, the way that it highlights the characteristics of a lot of the men in these stories was fantastic. Rosaline as a character, I absolutely loved. She was a fantastic perspective to be following, and the way that it ended, I really appreciated. I think that this is going to be a fantastic book for people who want to untangle the romanticizing of Romeo and Juliet. If you've read it in your teens and thought it was a romance, I would highly recommend rereading it and then being like, oh god, this is not romance. This is not romantic. And then after that, I would recommend picking up Fair Rosaline. We've got some group questions in the back here, like reading group questions that some books sometimes do, and some of them I found quite interesting, so I thought I'd go through them. So first of all, is how have your feelings and thoughts about Romeo and Juliet changed since reading Fair Rosaline? Slightly. I mean, again, I already did not think of Romeo and Juliet as a romance. I already thought poorly of the fickleness of Romeo. I never looked at it from the angle of Romeo grooming because I have always read it as Romeo also being a teenager. So I have read it as just like he makes these drastic decisions based on fleeting feelings, which fair. So I have never thought of it at the angle of Romeo grooming Juliet. It doesn't actually mention Romeo's age, as far as I'm aware. Interesting angle. Romeo is a particular type of toxic masculinity. Can you identify any others in this novel? There is a huge amount of toxic masculinity in this novel, one of which being Tybalt, who I like in this, but he does have this unchecked temper that we see in the original novel, as well as the original play, as well as in the novel, and pretty much every man in this is toxic. The least toxic is Tybalt. Actually, Benvolio is not too toxic either. Benvolio is pretty decent. Everyone else, pretty flippin' toxic. Next one's a spoiler, so I'll skip. Here we have, how did Romeo use the concept of romantic love to seduce both Rosaline and Juliet? And what does Romeo want from the girls he seduces? And how does Rosaline disappoint those expectations? This one's an odd one for me because book Romeo, he wants someone that he can control, basically. He wants someone who will buy into everything he says, do everything he says, and someone he can control, which Rosaline isn't quite as manipulable as Juliet, who is 13 at the time. But also, like, the way that he seduces them is an interesting concept because it has this idea of pretty words and extravagant gestures as a way of proving his love when he's not actually really taken on any of the risk the girls have, which is commonplace amongst seducers. They'll pretend that they're putting themselves on the line when really all they're doing is putting the women on the line. we've got here, which scenes in Fair Rosaline remind you of scenes from Romeo and Juliet, and how do they differ? Now, there are a lot of scenes in here, so that would be a very long-winded discussion. But one thing that I think was done really well is actually the scenes that were happening in tandem with other scenes. Like, I liked that more. So obviously just seeing the exact same scene. So for example, we do see the fight obviously between Mercutio and Tybalt happen, and then we also see the fight between Romeo and Tybalt happen as well. So those are scenes that we see happen. But there are so many scenes in this where you have characters that are doing something and you know where other characters are in the novel, which I thought was very cool and I really did appreciate. So then the last one that I will talk about here is Romeo and Juliet has become the blueprint for romantic love. But after reading this untelling of the classic story, what do you think Shakespeare's intentions were? I always read Romeo and Juliet as a story about the futility of feud and the way that pride can damage people, the way the obsession with legacy and lineage and self-importance can affect all of those around you. That's how I've always read this story. So the untelling didn't do very much in that regard. Again, the only perception that it changed for me was the angle at which Romeo may also be grooming Juliet, which was interesting and was an interesting take on it, instead of having him be a teen. I mean, I think that he's supposed to be in his early 20s, but when you think of Juliet as being 13, it's still absolutely disgusting. So I always read him as a teen, but given it doesn't mention his age, it is a valid suggestion and an interesting concept. So that's the only kind of thing that I think this book brought forth in regards to my thoughts on the original story. But I just think that the perspective from which we get it was absolutely phenomenal and I really enjoyed it. So there you have it. That's the end of my Warwickshire vlog, my Shakespeare country vlog. And this is not the book that I said I was going to read for this vlog, but the books I was going to read I still haven't managed to get. I looked around to try and buy them and I just couldn't find them anywhere, and I am not paying £9 for the ebook of a novella. I'm not doing it. I was going to buy them physically, I couldn't find them anywhere. So I picked this one up instead. So there you have it. I've read 3 books over the course of my time in the UK. And this one is my favourite. So this is obviously the concluding vlog. So hopefully no spoilers for the previous 2. But this one is my favourite. I had a wonderful time with it. I'd highly recommend you check it out if you are wanting a Shakespeare retelling. I have recently done a video talking about some Shakespeare retellings. So I will leave that linked if you want my thoughts on any others. But for now, that is all for this vlog. I'm home. I'm disgusting. I need a shower. That's what I'm going to go do now. So I will hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye.